You're listening to the Vint Wine Podcast, where you'll hear interviews and stories from around the wine world. From writers and critics to winemakers and sommeliers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping wine culture. Enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vint Wine Podcast. I am your host, Billy Galanko, and we have an exciting episode for you today. We have a fantastic interview with Chasity Cooper, wine culture expert, guru among the space, up-and-coming wine writer, wine enthusiast 40 under 40, and just a great person to know in the world of wine. So we'll get a little bit more on her, but before we get to our interview with Chasity, I'll touch on the news for this week. First, as a highlight from the whole world of food and wine, is the James Beard Award winners were announced last week, and we had a couple nominees on the podcast over the spring who were up for awards in Chicago. And unfortunately, our good friend Christy Norman did not win her category, but friend of the podcast, Bobby Stuckey, restaurant Frasca, did win Outstanding Restaurant of the Year. So congratulations to Bobby, Carlin, and the whole team over at Frasca. That is an amazing award. And Christy will get them probably next year. The Outstanding Professional in Beverage Service, which is the award she was nominated for, was won by Arjav Ezekiel. Apologies for probably mangling that name. But it was really, really fantastic and serendipitous to have both of them on the podcast the year that they were both nominated to win the award. So go back and listen to the episode with Christy and definitely listen to the episode with Bobby. You'll really learn why Frasca deserves another accolade in the James Beard Award for Outstanding Restaurant. Next, we have an interesting article that actually came out a little bit earlier this month from Jancis Robinson called Chardonnay from Buttery to Steely. Now, what I think is obvious about this article and something that's still worth kind of thinking about more deeply is that the style of Chardonnay has changed so much from the late 90s, early 2000s to now, very much away from that buttery, very rich style, more towards either a balanced or even just lean and crisp, unoaked style. And I thought about this article even more because I had a couple friends just come back from Napa, and they were saying how every winery they went to, they were like, the winery would say, this isn't your traditional Napa Chardonnay, it's lean and racy or bright and fresh. And it almost seemed like everyone was making a point saying that they were different than what the perceived style of Napa Chardonnay was. So I went back and read this article a little bit more closely and decided to include it in the news because Jancis makes the point that sure, there's been a style shift across the globe, which is actually really interesting. And then she goes into detail and talks about how this has manifested itself and certain regions and styles of Chardonnay being made around the world. And it's really interesting that she really runs the whole gamut. She talks about the different regions growing wine, or Chardonnay in particular, in California, Sonoma, Santa Barbara, as well as all the other regions that you may already know. She talks about Oregon. She goes and touches on the UK, South Africa, Australia's different regions, as well as New Zealand, and of course, France. So it's interesting, her point, to touch on a bunch of different regions, talk about the styles that are being produced and maybe how the stylistic change from big and oaky to lean and racy maybe manifests itself in different regions. But I would encourage anybody who is trying to branch out, maybe they have a go-to Chardonnay or region that they go to and they're trying to expand and explore wines from different regions. This article really covers a ton of awesome suggestions that I wouldn't necessarily have thought of right off the top of my head when I'm thinking to try a new Chardonnay or just branch out. So I recommend everybody go check it out. It's a thoughtful read, definitely a little bit thought-provoking, and you probably will discover a region, or maybe not discover, but be reminded of a region that you've been meaning to try Chardonnay from that you probably haven't, or haven't at least in a while. So check out this article. They're both on the Vint Marketplace news. And now, a little bit more background on Chasity Cooper. I came across Chasity when I was actually typing in searches for interesting people in the world of wine. I was trying to find more folks that aren't necessarily producers or maybe some of the most well-known writers that we've had on already. As you guys have all known, we had a lot of producers and we have a lot more great ones coming up. And we also have some great writers coming up. But I want to find more people who are on the up and coming, like Vint answer. Chasity is actually pretty well established already, but more folks that you probably should know in the wine world that maybe you haven't heard of already. Chasity was on the list of Wine Enthusiast 40 under 40, and she's written a really interesting book. I noticed that Chasity got in through a writing approach, and this is something that I've always thought was interesting and contemplated myself. Like, how do you get into wine writing with no wine background or connections? And much less, I've always thought this, and I think it's incredibly difficult. And she's able to basically go from a writing background in college. She starts writing a little bit more as her regular job out of college, and then is able to get her foot in the door and continue to grow her position in the wine writing space. And this includes, she has written her own book called The Wine Convo Generator, which is actually something I got from my dad for Father's Day. It's something really interesting if you or your friends are intimidated by, because this is the case with my dad, intimidated by using the right wine terms. My dad's always very particular about the words he chooses when he describes things, and he thinks when he's talking to me about wine, he's not going to use the right words, so he tends to be at a loss. I thought this book would be a good way to give him kind of that vocabulary arsenal, and I think the best way to describe it is just to read her little description of it that's in the book, because I'm not as good at doing it justice. Have you ever gone to a wine tasting, maybe at a posh winery or at a party with your hipster foodie friends, and after uncorking the bottle, swirling the wine in your glass, and giving it a sip, found that the only thing you're able to add to the expert conversation is the wine tastes like wine? It's okay. We've all been there. Whether you're looking to expand your wine vocabulary or you just want to sound like you know what you're doing, don't worry, we won't tell. This handy generator is there to help. Each of the 162 flippable cards offers an insightful quip that you can say on the fly or mix and match for a longer observation dripping with sommelier level wine knowledge. And what I like about this book is that it basically just gives you the tools that otherwise you would need to just be around wine people for an extended period of time to be able to use or say. I know firsthand, not having wine friends and not growing up in wine, I basically had to hear these terms over and over and deduce what they meant before I could even start using them. So I thought the book was really interesting. And then also the other reason, having Chasity on, she's an expert in wine culture. And beyond this book, Chasity is just doing great work in trying to expand the world of wine drinkers, whether it be younger people in general, and then just trying to make wine more approachable and open to everyone, really trying to write about the cultural moments that resonate not only with certain groups of individuals, but also just more broadly, and how to expand the wine world and make it an inviting place for everyone. So we cover a ton of great topics in this interview. We talk about how she got into wine. We talk about, again, how she got into wine writing, her cultural perspective on wine and social media's role and how it's growing these days. And then last but not least, we touch on the age-old question. If somebody asks you what your favorite wine is or to recommend them a wine, what do you do? And that is something I always struggle with. And she gave me really good tips. So now, without further ado, here is our interview with Chasity Cooper. Hi, Chasity. Thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to have you. Sometimes we come across guests in different ways, and sometimes it's famous producers or PR people reaching out. And you, I actually found on my own. I was just trying to literally find cool people, and at least my definition of cool in the wine space, who maybe were doing things a little differently. And I came across you in multiple different channels on Instagram, and also the Wine Enthusiast. I guess they call it 40 Tastemakers now. It used to be like the 40 under 40. So I really love what you're doing, and I'm excited to dive into your work.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat. I can talk about wine all day and everything connected to wine. So I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, me too. Can you start a little bit about how you fell into wine? Because I think you might be similar to me in that you didn't weren't raised in wine. You came into it at a later point in your life.
Yeah, so I was studying abroad in Madrid 15 years ago next month. 15 years ago around now, which is insane to say. But I was going into my senior year at Syracuse, decided Madrid because I do have some knowledge of the Spanish language, and I've been fascinated with Spanish culture for a really long time. And so during one of the last excursions we took was to a winery. I was newly 21. I was like, oh my gosh, I've never had this cultural experience. And I remember that day like it was yesterday, like hopping off the bus and walking through the vineyard and going into the cellar and then pairing wines with Spanish cheese at the end of the entire experience. And that for me was really when the interest started. It wasn't until I graduated, moved to DC, and I felt like I needed a hobby. I needed to almost find something to be interested in instead of being like a post-grad student looking for a job, if you will. And writing has always been a part of my life. I studied marketing and PR at Syracuse. I've been storytelling since I was like 9 years old. And so that writing piece was just second nature. But wine for me, it felt like a different language. It felt like something to learn, to explore, to share with other people. And so while I was in DC and getting my feet underneath me as a new post-grad student, Scandal with Kerry Washington, the Shonda Rhimes show came on. And I remember living in DC at the time. It was such a phenomenon. And I was like, oh, she drinks wine. She looks like me in a sense. And that kind of also got me going down this rabbit hole of, okay, where are the Black people in wine? Where are the people of color in wine? What are we drinking? What glassware are we using? Where are we shopping for wine? So I really just started asking myself those questions and really just doing a deep dive of wine bars and wine shops in DC to the point where I became the wine friend. And now almost, over 10 years later, it's still the same thing. My friends still hit me up and they're like, hey, what should I do for this? How do I pair that? And it's really just been a really cool opportunity to now more than ever look back and then realize how far I've been able to come just by being interested and curious.
Yeah, wow. One of the things that impressed me about your background is I think you were actually like, we're probably about the same age and you're 3 or 4 years ahead of me. It took me till after grad school and moving to New York where I discovered wine as a side thing, and then it snowballed from there. But you've taken on like the writing aspect of wine. There's one thing to be the wine friend. I've found that's easy enough, but like breaking into the actual like cadre of wine publications or anything is like hard unless you have like accreditations, which is why I just tried to do the CMS when I first started. So like, how did you first start like trying to write and actually get published? That's extremely difficult.
I'm so glad you said that because I think now it's such a habit to pitch a story or have an editor write me. But of course that took time. I started really on Instagram. So while watching Scandal when it was like TGIT or Olivia Pope ate popcorn for dinner and drank wine, I was like, okay, I have to do that to really embody this entire spirit of wine. But writing captions on Instagram back in 2012 and 2013 was really where I started. And then I was like, okay, I could move to my blog. And I started writing about different wine shops, different wine bars in DC. But the thing that really got me into the door, and I remember people talking, oh, you need to write for Vine Pair, you need to write for Wine Enthusiast. I wrote a Hennessy sangria recipe back in 2016 for Vine Pair, and that was the first thing that got me in the door. It wasn't like anything paid. I was like, gosh, I just wish somebody would like give me a byline, please. And so once I got that byline, it really just started to snowball from there. Working at a wine shop in DC also helped me to write better notes, to taste as much as I could. But I do have to give it to Instagram and just my love for writing and storytelling that gave me that foundation to be like, okay, I can take this elsewhere and really start to tell stories around wine.
So what were you doing work-wise while you were still trying to get your wine career off the ground?
Yeah, so I have an extensive career in nonprofit communications. I worked for a number of different nonprofits, mostly in the marketing communications realm. There have been some spots where I was between jobs and really being able to have wine as another career and write more often, go on different press trips and really explore different regions, working for local wine bars here in Chicago as a way to kind of like fill in those gaps. But traditionally speaking, a marketing and communications girly, I can write a press release almost with my eyes closed, but also I can help with social media strategy and marketing campaigns. And so that's where professionally I reside. And now thinking about being able to build my own agency and do that really cool thing around, again, storytelling and marketing and just helping people better connect and commune with wine.
Yeah, that makes sense. My background's in brand management as well, so it resonates completely with me. How many times before you started really focusing on wine as like your main thing did your friends be like, you should work in wine? It would be like really easy. They're like, you like wine, you should do it.
Since 2015, I will be honest, like once I really started getting serious about it, my friends were like, oh, we should just do X. And I'm like, guys, it's not that simple. I wish I could just move to California. Now, looking back, I probably could have just moved to California and done a harvest and broken into it that way. But I know myself well enough where science and math were not my strong suits in school. So I knew to stick with words, stick with having that interaction with folks one-on-one or in a group setting to be able to tell them about where the wine came from or how to pair it with a certain dinner. And now more than, I think I started to take my friend's advice probably 5 years ago during the pandemic where I was like, okay, y'all are right. I need to stop playing and actually dive right into this industry and really make what I do my own, but still keep in mind my colleagues and, of course, the consumer.
Mm-hmm. So when you did decide to start going more full bore and you have, you're writing about wine culture, but it's like your own take and it's like the modern day term of like culture. It's not like what people think of when it's old, stuffy wine culture. How did you go about defining that and making sure what you were writing was like approachable to many different types of audiences, maybe people who didn't drink wine as well as people who are wine savvy? How did that work?
Absolutely. I think I took cue from my friends and family with hearing so many people be like, I'm not a big wine drinker, or I only drink X, Y, and Z for this occasion or at this place. And so a lot of that experience started to swirl around my head. And I'm like, okay, I connect with people. Wine is the thing that brings us together, but it could be traveling. It could be at a dinner or a barbecue. It could be for a celebration. And so really thinking very macro about culture. Like we're all a part of a global culture. And then you can get very micro. You spent time in New York. I spent time in New York too. And New York has its own culture. Here in Chicago, we both have our own different types of food cultures. So really just thinking about culture on a macro level, but also on a micro level, and how we all have something in common because we're all human. But also with wine, it's okay, you don't like orange wine? Well, you're drinking white wine, so maybe you just like this particular style in a different expression. So I really think that's really what started to get me thinking more about culture in a sense where I can connect with everybody.
And how have you seen, I feel like, I guess maybe we'll take one step over to like social media and wine. I feel like it's allowed many more people to have a voice, and there are people out there who you can hear from on a regular basis that you wouldn't have when you first started writing, when I first got into wine. How do you think that has helped infuse more, I guess, different terms and like references into the world of wine?
Yeah, I think I'll start with like social media and how social media has the tendency to make things trendy. So, for example, the Sauvignon Blanc and jalapeno trend that's rolling around right now.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I was like, come on, guys, let's not do that. But then I'm like, okay, that's an approach. That's an easy way for people who maybe don't drink wine all the time or don't really know about phenolics to have that experience. So who am I to gatekeep in a way? Oh, you shouldn't do that. I think social media also really over the last decade has, like you said, allowed people to have a voice around wine. I will say largely people should be mindful of the information they are taking in. Some people they mean well and they're like, oh yeah, you should absolutely do this. And sometimes it's like, well, let me go actually pivot over here and research, because I think wine is such a it's a historical artifact. Like wine has been here forever. as long as we know, as long as time. And so not neglecting the fact that, yes, while things are cool and trendy and natty wines and drinking wine out of a solo cup is acceptable in the summertime, when you don't want anybody to break your really good glassware, we still have to honor where the regions that have allowed for us to enjoy this wine, the people more than anything who work hard in the vineyards to harvest the grapes, the creativity behind the winemakers. And social media has, I think, allowed for wine to get a little bit more exposure than it's probably had in the past. But I think there's still this fine line where it's like, I can just get into wine, or I can get into craft beer tomorrow if I wanted to. But some people will be like, okay, hold on, Chasity, stay in your lane because you don't know beer, wine. So I think it's just being mindful and practicing some discernment. But overall, I think social media has allowed for people to have a platform to talk about wine, to share their ideas and share maybe their frustrations about it. And also people to share where you can buy certain wines or where certain wines might be available.
Yeah. I also think it's just funny, like, there's a lot of people who but they give scores, like they're a critic, like they're just like Joe Schmo and they just like 84 points. And I'm like, what does this even mean? What is your table? But so, yeah, I think that's part of the cool things. And back to the jalapeno thing. Well, I have two things. We brought this up on the podcast recently. And one, I actually don't have as much of like things people put into wine. People have been putting things into wine for thousands of years. If we went back to Greece. So that's not too weird. I've come to terms with that. I prefer people to like putting ice in red wine. That kind of changes the structure. I think you would enjoy it more if we just put it in the fridge for you. But at least there are jalapeno notes in some Sauvignon Blanc. So this is almost just like enhancing what you will find. So I don't have a big beef with that. Is that I could recommend you something like maybe a Chilean, really herbal Chilean Sauvignon Blanc that actually tastes already like jalapenos. So you don't have to do that.
Right.
But anyway, I've been going on about that. My wife does not want to hear me talk about the jalapeno thing. With that, have you also seen, I guess we talked a little bit about the natural wine trend too. I live here in Los Angeles. I think our listeners will know I'm surrounded within walking distance of 7 natural wine bars. That's what I drink when I'm not like studying for exams or anything. Yeah. Have you seen that kind of open the gateway a little bit to bridge some people who maybe were on the fence about even traditional like wine tastes and profiles? Maybe they like VA at heavy levels in their wine, or they were like craft beer drinkers and they find this more approachable.
Yeah, I think that's also been a fascinating point over the course of my career, just seeing how people are able to make those connections. And in recent weeks, as I'm describing certain wines. So, for example, someone's, okay, how do I determine acidity, or how do I determine the weight on a wine? I'm like, okay, cool. Milk. They're like, yeah. I'm like, think about whole milk and feel how that feels in your mouth, and think about skim milk or 2% milk. They're like, oh, that makes so much sense. I'm like, exactly. If you're a tea drinker, you like things that are herbal, you might find yourself attracted to more wines that have stronger herbaceous quality. So I think being able to find ways to connect people to big ideas like tannins, which we don't think is a big idea, but for people like, how do I even detect that? Being able to find everyday things or everyday aromas or everyday items that people can connect themselves to. But I think overall, it's one of those things where you just have to be willing to try. And there's so many really cool wine bars here in Chicago. A handful of them are natural wine bars. So I find it so cool that people just walk in and they're like, I don't know what to expect. I'm like, you're going to have a great glass regardless. And really just giving people the opportunity to learn something new and to connect with something new too.
Yeah. Yeah, here in LA, it's interesting because I'm on the east side. So there's people want to be cool. So they go to the natural wine bars. But if you go to Beverly Hills, they want to be cool. So they go to like the Wallies of the world, or like the formal places. On the note of tannin, one thing, if anybody wants to try like extremely tannic, banana peels are like the most tannic thing like ever. Okay, I'm happy because people don't normally like, why are you eating banana peels? So I'm like, well, sometimes I can't open it. So I use my mouth to open like a great banana.
Yeah, exactly that.
And then immediately coats your palate. So in the recent like year or two, what are some trends you've been watching? What are some things you've been writing about? What are some interesting pieces that you've worked on?
Yes, I think over the last 2 years, food and wine have really been standout for me. I love focusing on grape varietals and places more than anything. But if I were to go back and look at my recent stories, food and wine, really over the last, I'd say 3 or 4 years, primarily during the pandemic when people were in the house and they're having the online happy hours or the wine. I did a ton of virtual wine tastings in 2020 and 2021. And so to be able to, I think one of the cool things I've been able to do living in Chicago and us having such a rich food culture was like run and get, okay, I'm gonna get a Chicago hot dog from Portillo's. I'm gonna go get a Hibberito from the North Side. I'm gonna go grab some Harold's chicken and pair that with something. And Garrett's popcorn, like what would that look like with some ice wine? Probably too sweet. So maybe let's think about the profile a different way. I think food and wine it's just, again, like peanut butter and jelly, but they go so well together and it gives people an opportunity to be like, oh, okay, this crispy, crunchy piece of chicken or this delicious, warm, salty basket of French fries pairs well with a sparkling wine. Why? Because there's acid happening in the wine that needs to cut through all of the oil and the salt and the fat that you're experiencing. So really having people ask me like, Chasity, what would I pair with this? And I go down a rabbit hole has been so much fun to me. I would also say writing about the people behind certain labels, around connecting with individuals who work in marketing or sales and getting their insight, because we all sit in different spaces in this industry. As someone, you just took a big exam that I think won, bravo, but also as someone who is studying wine so intently, like you have your own expertise that I think I would come to you like, hey, Billy, what is it like to prepare for such an exam like that? Because you are a student of it. So I think really connecting with the individual and however they show up in wine has always been fascinating to me. And it's definitely something I'm going to continue to do in my writing moving forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think some friends and my wife asked me like, why are you in the MW program? What's the point of it? And like I've done a couple trips with the program as well as these exams. And just meeting those people, like you're saying, you work in all different facets of the wine industry is so interesting. And something like I'm not going to interact with these people otherwise. I live in Los Angeles. I'm not in Napa, so it's like, how can I interact with wine people doing cool things? I think, and we talked about this a little offline, so much goes into making a wine and getting it to your table that I don't think people truly understand all of the elements, not only that go into the cost, but like all the people that have to work, but everything from chemistry to the people in the vineyards to bottling, into your point, the salespeople who actually like sell it to your local shop. There's so much that goes into getting from A to B to C to your table.
Exactly. And I think a lot of times now more than ever, with the cost of living increasing, people, well, why does this cost so much? Because it costs for it to get here. If the wine is coming from Spain or France or Italy, a couple dollars and cents have to go into the shipment of the wine. And then you think about the distribution and suppliers, they have to get a cut too. And then for it to ultimately end up on your shelf at Benny's for $19.99, when probably it costs a little bit less to make than that, it should be a no-brainer. Okay, I'm going to grab this and share this with my friends. But I think that's also what makes me such a nerd when it comes to wine. I love thinking about from seeing some seedlings in the Finger Lakes last week, first the veraison happening, and then being like, oh man, like that might not even it'll be in bottle by October, but I might not be able to drink it until 2027 or 2028. So really just reminding people as I'm doing wine education, as I'm writing, like it's a process and we have to remain patient, from getting the opportunity to taste the wine to if we want to ship a wine to a friend or a family member. There might be a little bit of delay there sometimes. I know during the pandemic, I was getting wine every day from a FedEx or a UPS shipment. I'm like, how did this get here so quickly? But I mean, looking back now, that was the only way I was going to be able to experience wine from Traverse City or wine from Lodi or wine from Texas because I couldn't go to those places at that time. So I think the more that the consumer understands the process and appreciates it, I think they'll have a stronger appreciation for what is in their glass and what they get to experience.
Yeah, for sure. I have 5 questions, and I have a bad habit of normally asking them all at once, so I'm going to try to do them one at a time. I'll just go with the last one that was inspired. So when you said Traverse City, that's up in Michigan, and you're tasting Texas wines. What wines from unexpected states in the U.S. have really surprised you, or what regions are you really into kind of right now?
So I'm going to Boise, Idaho at the end of the month, and I am jazzed. Like, they sent me some wine, like, hey, like, we're really excited for you to come. I'm like, I am too, because who knew that Boise, Idaho was making wine? All 50 states make wine, but they, surprisingly, the wines that I've had, and I've shared them with family and friends because sharing is caring. But some of them, I'm like, no, I might have to keep this for myself. They really are doing well with, I would say, Italian varieties. And again, I've never been to Idaho. So all I know about Idaho is potatoes. That's pretty much it. So I'm looking forward to understanding the environment there and then having a better understanding of, oh, this is why these grape varieties do well here. With Texas, Tempranillo, a lot of Spanish varieties because it's so hot down there. Those do well. I have to sing praises of the Finger Lakes because I just came from there from Riesling Camp. Riesling is king, but Cab Franc also, and they also have all these different hybrid varieties that do really well out there. And then finally, I would say I'd probably throw in Virginia. While it's not surprising, I just think they do wine really well. And as of late, we've been seeing a lot of press about Virginia. There's this one story that Wine Enthusiast posted. They're like, here are the 5 places that are vying to be the next Napa. I ran straight to the comments because I was like, I need to see what everybody's saying, because Napa's great. Nobody's taking anything away from Napa and what it represents to American wine. But we also have to understand that North Carolina is making wine. Georgia is making wine. They make wine here in Illinois, like down in the southern parts of Illinois, Ohio, Missouri. So a lot of these states, while that might not be the thing they want to hang their hat on first, they are doing it. And I really encourage folks, if you live in Los Angeles, see if you can get up to Walla Walla, or if you get to the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and check out these places that have been around for a while and they make really incredible wine, but you might not always hear about them because California is the golden child of American wine, which is cool. Like we have to have somebody who's leading the way, but also considering the other states that are doing it really, really well. But Boise, to bring it all together, I will have to let you know, and I'm probably just going to be in awe once I get back. Like, Boise, Idaho really makes wine, guys. Like, it's really a thing, and it's good. It's good.
Very cool. I need to find some Idaho wine now. But I'm originally from Virginia, and my co-host lived there for a while, and he is a huge Virginia wine stan. He'll be happy to hear you made your list. But I couldn't agree more with tasting all over. I'm trying to expand more. When I started tasting, I was living in New York, and I refused to drink any California wine. So it wasn't until I moved here after working at Vintage in Australia that I actually started tasting wines from the region. And I initially refused to drink Napa. I was like, I'm going to do anything that is more obscure than Napa. So it's been
Paso. Not doing that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah.
I worked for a Paso producer for a little while. So I learned vertically up the state here. So it's been really cool. But so on the note of quality and unsurprising regions, I've had people ask me, like, you probably get this in many different ways, but it's either what's the best wine under $30, or like, how do I find a good wine from, and then they're normally be like, what's a good Napa wine under $30? Or they'll give some specific region. And I'm like, all right, let's take a step back. It sounds like you're asking about value. Where else can you find value? How do you approach that question?
Oh, that's a great question. I think value to me, I think about the grape first and then the region. And cost will come in. I think people have to understand, and we've said this before, you spend $15, $20 on wine, And you can find some good wines for those price points. But if we're talking about quality and the winemaking, definitely starting with the grape. And then, okay, you like Pinot Noir. Okay, what's the wine for? Is it for dinner? Are you gifting it? Okay, Pinot Noir. So we could go to France, but if you don't want to spend that much, then we could go to Oregon and find some good wines in that area. So it really depends on the person. If they're just looking for, I want something high alcohol, super tannic, really big and bold, I'm like, well, come on, we could go down to Uruguay and get some Tannat if that's what you want, if that's really where you want to go. Or we can end up in Napa and do a big cab, which I'm always fascinated by our fellow millennials who are like, oh, I love a big Napa cab. I'm like, because there's so many other more wines like for you to love, and I just want to bring them in and hold them close. There's so many other great wines. Napa Cab is incredible. I've had some amazing expressions of it, but I think really giving people an opportunity to expand their palate via place. So the grape does well, and Chardonnay does well all over the world. Chenin Blanc does well all over the world. But thinking about, okay, are you looking for more cool climate? Are you looking for some baked fruit character? Thinking about the alcohol content, that's where my brain works. A lot of times when people ask me questions, I think about the scene in The Hangover where Zach Galifianakis, you know his last name.
Galifianakis, yeah.
He's in the casino and he's obviously illegally counting cards, but that's how my brain works. So I'm like, okay. And I'll end up there for that person. So really, it depends on the person and the grape, and then I expand with the region.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love that meme. Like I'm constantly walking around like feeling like that. How would you, I agree. I typically I try to understand what they're asking first. So sometimes it's just like they don't want to spend a lot. So I'll just give them like general regions. I actually had this. I was on a plane recently. I was up to NorCal. It was flying into Santa Rosa. So he's like, what are some cheap wines around here? I was like, well, there aren't any cheap wines from around here. He's like, good cheap wines. I was like, well, anyways, like anything you couldn't find in the grocery store back home. So I was like, in general, maybe look at like Spain or Italy. Like you can tend to find great value for relatively affordable prices. But he's, well, I drink port. Is there anything up here port? And I really like higher alcohol sweet wines. And I was like trying to figure out, I ended up like recommending like a Zin from like up a little bit closer by like Lytton Springs or Dry Creek. But I was like, he wanted a dry wine, asking for it. But I was like, I don't really think you want a dry wine from up here. So how do you approach it when people are asking about a really dry wine? There's a wine bar in LA where they don't have a menu. You go in and say what you want. And I normally sit by the cash register just because it's always open. Mm-hmm. And then people are coming in asking for very specific wines and it's not what they want at all. And then the som has to give them what they think they want. How do you navigate that when you're giving recommendations?
First of all, I love that wine bar. I've been once and I was blown away at how like, I'm thinking of this and they just nailed it. So shout out, I forget the name of the wine.
Was it Covell?
Yes.
Good. We're on the same page. Same wine bar.
Like my friends, we have to go here. I'm like, guys, we've been drinking since 4, but okay, let's do it. So when someone, and those are usually the format of questions I get from a lot of friends and family. I only do sweet wines, or so let's use Moscato as an example. This is not a shade to Moscato. I'm just using it as a starting point. I take that and I'm like, okay, this person probably likes sweet lusciousness, but they also like acids. So I'm like, okay, maybe we could do Gewurz. We could do a late harvest Riesling. You're still going to find that tasting profile, that flavor profile, because it's ultimately like, how do they want to feel at the end of having that first sip or having that first glass? So I try to, if they want something high alcohol, like the gentleman you mentioned, I mean, port, yeah, of course. But there's also, like you said, Old Zinfandel tends to be higher on the alcohol spectrum. I also think about different Merlot that could be, depending on, again, the style and the expression in which it was made. But usually I think more so, okay, this person wants a sweet wine. I'm not getting them Moscato that they want, but okay, where else can I take them that has a very similar profile? And it's really hard sometimes when you're working at a wine bar and somebody's like, I only do X. I'm like, well, we don't have that. So I'm going to bring you something for you to try. And usually they're like, oh, I love that. And I also just think about, I don't know why juice and pop come to mind as well. Like, everyone's like, oh, I love Fanta or I love Diet Coke. I'm like, okay, those are different levels of sweetness. So, okay, where can I take this person on that journey, starting with them where they are, and then going out on my little conquest and then coming back with me like, hey, I couldn't find Diet Coke, but I found something that I think you'll like. So again, I think meeting the person where they are is the most important. Now, if they're being a little bit challenging and difficult, or no, I only do this, I'm like, okay, well, look, I'm going to go get you this port and you can enjoy it. But usually people are a lot more flexible, especially in the settings of wine bars and wine shops where we may not have this exact wine that you're looking for, but we do have something similar.
Mm-hmm. Luckily, there are some skin contact, like pet nats these days that taste like Fanta, so that person would be unlocked. On the, I think the descriptors I hear all the time are dry and smooth. Like when the guy who cuts my hair, we had some amazing wines. I was like, what were they like? And he's dry and smooth. And I was like, he's telling me about everything from like a gigantic cab to a Zinfandel to a Chardonnay that he liked. They were all just dry and smooth. And I was like, that's interesting, because he was asking me for other recs of places to go elsewhere. And I was like, I can't help you with that, but I'll give it a shot, my man. So here's another question that I always end up rambling about, and people just end up walking away and being disinterested, is what's your favorite wine? How do you answer that? Because it's incredibly difficult.
Say if I had $1 every time somebody asks me that question, I have $100 right now. But I usually tell people it depends on the day. So like, for example, today it's really cloudy and rainy in Chicago. Well, let me just start. I love sparkling, and I could drink sparkling wine every day if I could. Like, just that's a starting point for me. But I usually go by like the weather and the temperature, and it's okay. If it's like balmy outside, I might want something crisp and delicious. Oh, what did I have recently? I might want a Riesling, because again, I just came from the Finger Lakes, so that's fresh on top of mind. But if it's a 80-degree day, the sun is out, and I want red, I want a chillable red. So I might go find a pet nat or a darker colored rosé to get those tannins that I want, because I don't want the traditional rosé from Provence. Orange wine is always something that's right beneath sparkling, because again, I just love texture when it comes to wine. So I'm always going to be down for, if I find some tart traits, wow, thank you for the wine diamonds. I love that. But I'm definitely a texture person. So I usually tell people, like, hey, it depends on the day, but sparkling Cremant, Cava, Prosecco, champagne, or just sparkling from California, I could drink those all the time. And then I'm like, okay, well, it depends also on where I am and what I'm doing, that I'll be able to be like, okay, I can venture off. But Chenin Blanc are some of my favorite white grape varieties. Cab Franc is like the red that has my heart. And people are like, why Cab Franc? I'm like, well, Cab Franc is the daddy of Cab Sav, so you have to respect the parent in that regard. What else? For me, it's like a feeling. It's like, how am I feeling? How do I want to feel? Do I want to engage with people? Okay, I need something light and spritzy or fun. Do I want to share it with people? Or do I want to just be like at home, not bothering with folks, with my own glass of wine and just to myself? So it really does depend on the day for me. I'm that type of wine drinker.
That is a much better answer than I get. I'm going to steal that and use it now, because I immediately go in, well, I like high acid wine. And then they immediately just, their eyes glaze over and they turn away. They have no idea what that means.
I'm like, oh, tell me more, because I love I love acid. Like, acidity is my favorite thing. I'm like, no, please go on. People are like, well, I'm just going to go over here. I'm like, well, I'm engaging because this is my type of jam right here, for sure.
Exactly. Like wine to wine, people know what I'm talking about. But normal people, they're like, that is not at all. So I'm just going to be like, well, it depends on the day. And then that gives me an out. I'll just pick a random wine. My wife's very similar. I feel like she has to open her weather app and see what the temperature is before she decides. Because if it's below a certain thing, she can't have whites today, or like above. So on that note of, okay, cool, that's what you recommend. This is what people are asking for. where do you think the wine world is? This is a general question right now. It's like, where do you think we're at right now? People, like statistically, are either drinking less and drinking better, or they're just trying to turn away maybe to alternatives, maybe wine and alternative packaging. Are you seeing people experiment, slow down? What are you seeing on your side and with folks from your writing?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are, I think the wine industry overall, I don't want to say we're having an identity crisis because I think we know exactly who we are as an industry, but it's a matter of like, how do we continue to show up as things around us continue to change? And I saw this interesting New York Times article the other day that said Gen Zers don't leave their tap open. I'm like, oh, here we go. This is how 15 years ago, it was like millennials aren't drinking. Like we just graduated from college. Like we don't have the money to, and even now, we don't have the money yet to build a strong portfolio or invest in wine like our parents and grandparents did. And so what I'm seeing now is that like people are really into the low intervention. So like things that are not as high in alcohol, things that won't necessarily give folks a hangover or they won't have them feeling, oh man, like this is really heavy for my palate or even my pocket. But low intervention, I still think natural wines for sure they have a place in space. I would also say I've gotten a lot of questions about non-alcoholic wine, believe it or not, like, and people being interested in wanting to have that wine experience. But similarly, okay, I don't want to drink, but I want to have that experience of drinking with family and friends. I think I saw last summer, I felt like the orange wine, it was a craze. So many people who were like Gen Z or some millennials were like, oh my gosh, I just found this orange wine. It's so great. I'm like, okay, cool. Like orange wine's been around forever, but I love that you're trying it. That's so great. So I think natural wines, orange wine, low intervention, those are the wines that I'm starting to see more that people are engaging with. But then I'm thinking about the elder millennials, those of us maybe 34, 35, we are digging more into Chenin Blanc. We are digging more into grape varieties from Greece and Croatia. So while we can't maybe not get to those places yet, we're like, okay, I can enjoy a bottle of wine from this place in the meantime. So I definitely have been seeing it's been a range. It's been a range of places, but here in Chicago, I definitely can point people in the direction they want to go depending on what they're looking for, which I'm really, really grateful for too.
Cool. As we get closer to the end here, one thing, people anybody, like there was a stat that we had to have all these stats to possibly include in our theory essays. So I have all these like numbers banging around in my head. And one was that like 4 in 5 millennials would buy something they saw recommended on social media. Do you see Gen Z or Zoomers, as the article said, but do you see people influenced by celebrities, musicians, and even more nowadays, athletes actually as well, like driving ideas of what they might want to drink?
No, I think I will say maybe 10 years ago when I remember seeing a post of LeBron James with a whole bunch of other athletes who love wine. So I think it was like Durant, Carmelo Anthony, and Dwayne Wade. And LeBron was posting some very expensive bottles to Instagram. And somebody was like, you need to stop that because somebody might come and dig into your wine cellar. I think now it's hard to say because, again, you have a lot of celebrities who are breaking into spirits. You have celebrities who are still doing the wine thing. I don't think this particular generation is, I don't want to say impressed, but they're not as enthusiastic as we were 10 years ago. Oh, has a tequila out, or Pink has a wine that people can't get, but she makes wine. So now it's kind of like, okay, there's so many options for folks that I feel like it really does. It depends on the person, but I think generationally, the Zoomers aren't necessarily, I really don't know any of the celebrities that they tend to follow these days, but let's say Cardi B was like, oh, I came out with a wine. Some people might be interested. I know she did the whip shots not too long ago that people were going to buy, but sometimes things are here today and gone tomorrow. But I think moving forward, generations may be inspired by the impact that people can have on the industry. So whether they're making investments in the people, the place, collecting wine is cool, but I don't think that's necessarily where people are like, oh, I need to be like this person. For someone like Dwayne Wade to sit on the board of UC Davis and really be involved in ensuring that Black and brown folks have space in the wine industry to have certain roles, to be winemakers if they want to. I think that impact is going to be more impressive on generations, ours and the ones behind us.
Yeah. On that front of trying to inspire future generations, I think the basketball players quickly were drinking wine that nobody could ever afford. And then, so I do think it's cool that, and then I think it also became less popular to have your face as the brand. It's like, it was more legit if they found out that you helped make it or something else in the background. Like we did some videos before, like Channing Frye, who's like in Chosen Family Wine, and like he helps promote it, but it's because he like loves wine and wants to make things approachable. And then there's also Andre Houston Mack too, who's also making his own wine, but also trying to educate people on the entry level of wine. So like you can learn about this, and then you can also learn about his wine on the side as well. So I think that's really interesting. But interesting. Well, I won't keep you much longer here. I would like to ask at the end here, what about you have coming up on your radar? Is there anything, any big travels, any big pieces you're working on? Or, oh, actually your book too. I completely forgot. I thought your book was really interesting. I'd like to talk about that as well.
Thank you. The book is a little over a year old. I think what I'm hoping to gamify the book.
I thought it was a game to begin with, actually.
Yeah, so it's like very flippable. I think that if I were to go back and really have a more collaborative experience with the publisher, I would have formatted the book a little differently. So I would have probably split the tasting notes by white, red, sparkling. But I think gamifying it, turning into a card deck, a lot of my friends would be like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Like, how can we make this a more engaging experience? As for travels, Boise is coming up at the end of the month. Really excited about that. Anything else this year? Not yet on my radar.
While you're thinking, could you actually explain a little bit more about what the book is for our listeners? I think that was something I thought was fascinating. I wanted to
so Wine Convo Generator is a flip book. It has over 150,000 quips that you can match based on, I wish I had a book next to me. I should have thought about that. But pretty much what happens is you open the book and there are 3 sections that you can flip through and mix and match the different wine expressions. So I think one of the ones I was really proud about getting into the book, this is a porch pounder. We're coming into summertime. You definitely need those types of wines. But then you have things that like one word phrases like rustic or, do you think this was made with organic grapes? So there's some questions in there too, where it'll really just open up the floor for people to talk about what they're experiencing in their glass or what they might not be experiencing in their glass, depending on who you might be hanging out with. It's a really fun book. I think it's one of those things that you can keep on your coffee table. It's going to catch somebody's eye because you're like, Wine Convo Generator. What's that? It's a book that generates conversation around wine. And the terms in there, I tried not to get too nerdy, but there are some phrases in there where people will be like, I sound like a sommelier. I'm like, you keep doing that. Like, that's great. Giving people the opportunity and the agency to sound like they know what they're talking about wine-wise, but now encourage them to maybe study particular grape variety more or explore a region that they may not have intended to when they started their wine journey. So it's a very fun, interactive book available everywhere books are sold, Amazon, Walmart, your local bookstore. So it's been fun using that as a tool in certain tastings hang out with my family and using that book as well has been really cool.
Thank you so much for the time. This has been great. I know I'll follow up with you and ask for more personal tips as well, but I really appreciate you taking so much time today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. That is our interview with Chasity Cooper. I hope everybody found it as insightful as I did. For you or even your friends, if you want to get the Wine Convo Generator, I highly recommend it. Go out. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it online. And for now, that is our episode for this week. We will be back with another 5 questions on Friday and a full episode next week. Cheers.